Good afternoon and good evening. I know we have lots of people joining from different parts of the country, and I want to thank you all for being with us today. My name is Stephen Gilchrist. I'm Yamadji from the Igara Language Group of Northwest Western Australia, and I'm lecturer of Indigenous art here at the University of Sydney, and I'm also Deputy Director of the Power Institute. And on behalf of the Power Institute, I'd really like to welcome you to tonight's discussion titled Barkandji Ways of Being. We've got a great lineup tonight, but before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people on whose customary lands I'm now on and the Power Institute stands. This place was named by the Gadigal, for the Gadigal, because of the Gadigal, and I pay my deep respect to their ancestors of the past, present and future who have been keepers and couriers of this knowledge. I share a deep commitment to making visible, audible and tangible the Indigenous knowledge embedded in and safeguarded through people and place. So tonight's distinguished panel is composed of Emu Cumpston and Zena Cumpston, Raymond Zada and David Doyle. And I'd like to thank you all for being part of tonight's discussion and taking time out of your busy schedules to connect with us tonight and share your experiences and ideas with us. And I'd also like to thank tonight's audience for connecting us to in this way. The cultural context for this series is really to provide a platform to amplify the rich Indigenous systems of knowledge that persist in country, in ourselves and in our communities. And this series attempts to highlight the plurality and multi-dimensionality of Indigenous ways of being in the place now termed Australia. It also tries to mark many common shared points of commonality. So we were really motivated by the question of how can we make visible Indigenous forms of solidarity, sovereignty in all its manifestations, and knowledge production in and on Indigenous terms. And part of the thinking behind this series is to create these moments of togetherness without conflating it into sameness. There are, of course, multiple and multiplying ways of being Indigenous, and we're interested in both the privilege and challenges of asserting cultural value in all its complexities and specificities. How do we re-spirit our lands, our art, our communities, ourselves? And we need these opportunities to gather, to restore our ways of being and to tell our own stories in our own ways for and with each other. So for me, it feels like time well spent. So we really need to rewrite these stories that have been told about us and author new stories that create new futures, new connections, and new possibilities. The land is a great and generous teacher. It is the message and the messenger. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panelists about their own collaborative and individual learnings of place, of art, of culture, and of people. So it's my great pleasure to hand over to Zena and Emu Cumpston, who were invited to take part in this series and who have collaboratively co-designed tonight's format. Emu Cumpston is a Barkindji artist, curator, writer, and educator, whose family are also of Afghan, Irish, and English descent. She commenced at the Art Gallery of South Australia in 2008, which is when I first met you, and is currently the curator of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art. Since 2014, she's also been the artistic director of Barkandji Festival of Contemporary Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art. Nikki's also an incredible artist, and I think we're lucky enough to see a few of your works tonight. Zena Cumpston is a Barkandji woman with family connections to Broken Hill and Menindee in Western New South Wales. Zena is a writer and also works as a curator, consultant, educator, and researcher. Most recently, she curated the Emu Sky exhibition at the University of Melbourne, bringing together more than 30 Aboriginal community members to share their stories, research, knowledge, and artworks in an exploration of Indigenous knowledge. Zena's book, Plants, Past, Present, and Future, will be released next month, so congratulations on the publication, Zena. I'm really looking forward to that. So over to you both. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start now.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Stephen. I have had to write a little script for my intro because I'm not long out of COVID and I'm finding it very difficult to remember things and speak properly. So I'm not talking from a script for the rest of tonight, but just at the start, I wanted to make sure I didn't forget anyone. So I want to start by acknowledging our mob, Barkindji community, our elders and ancestors. And I also want to acknowledge Kaurna mob, on whose country Nikki and I join from today. We give our respect to the Kaurna peoples, their elders, community members, and their young people. We acknowledge their living culture and the power of work they do today to keep country and culture strong. And respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining today. And we want to extend that respect to all those who are joining us today, taking time to hear our story. Thank you for tuning in. And yeah, special thanks to Stephen and Nicholas and the Power Institute for having us. So I guess one thing that's really important to start is by saying that obviously we can't, we don't, and we wouldn't want to speak for all Barkindji mob. And whilst we've all been grateful growing up, knowing and being proud of who we are, several of us have not grown up on our country. So this obviously gives a diverse experience of being Barkindji and what it means to each of us to be Barkindji. So maybe to start with, I'll give the audience an idea of where our mob is situated in terms of the country that we belong to. So my way of seeing it, and others might have a different way, so please pipe up if you want to add anything in, but basically Wilcannia is kind of in the middle of Barkindji country, and it's surrounded on all sides by Barkindji speaking people. And our people are all along our Barker, which some people call the Darling River, and big tracts of country either side of our Barker from near Burke down to Wentworth. We have several subgroups that make up our mob that speak different dialects of Barkindji language. And yeah, I want to throw to David Doyle to talk a little bit about language and what our name means.
So I suppose, the words Kuri or Murri are pretty synonymous throughout Australia as being words that Aboriginal people use to describe themselves. But over our way, we use the word Wimpicha, which pre-colonisation just meant a person. So post-colonisation, we now use it as a word for a person of Aboriginal descent from our country. And we use that when we're speaking to each other and about each other. So Wimpicha is a word that we use as opposed to Kuri and Murri. So the other one we've talked about was the word Barkandji. Barkandji is pretty much directly translated as Darling River people. So Barker meaning Darling River, and we always refer to the river as a Barker, and Inji as people of or coming from. So with that, I just wanted to do a quick acknowledgement as well, which is Nai Wimpicha, Itu Kira Kira, Inana, Europina, Wimpicha, Wumbachuku, Witu, Kumbakula, Gandinya, Gaipu, Karinki, Ikimandi. So that was just hello Aboriginal people. This is our land. We remember the people, the old men, the old women, yesterday, today and tomorrow of this land. So thanks for that, Zena, giving me the opportunity to talk, and I'll talk a little bit more later on, but I'll shoot back to you guys.
Thanks, Dave. And I guess, Nick, I might throw to you before we get to Stephen's questions. I guess it'd be good to hear why we're here and how we ended up here, how did this start? Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So it's wonderful that we're all able to work together. There's a collective of 6 of us who are creating work for an exhibition for March 2023, which will be held at Bunjil Place Gallery in Narre Warren, just out of Melbourne. Mm. And how it started was a conversation that I was having with Penny Teal, the curator there, and Georgia Cribb, the director, around presenting some of my work out at Bunjil Place. And I went to visit them and I looked at the gallery, and it's just the most beautiful building, which is part of the council for that region. And it's a purpose-built building that was built in 2017. They have an incredibly large gallery. They have a library. All of the offices are there for the council staff, as well as, and I think it's an 800-seat theatre. and sort of rooms to do, you know, there's dance floors that are sprung to do dance performance. And it's just this great facility that has this incredible, you know, multicultural groups of people that come and engage with the place. And so I just thought, you know, for years we've been talking as a group of Barkandji artists about, you know, wouldn't it be great to do something together? And I thought maybe this is it, maybe this is the opportunity. And so I presented that idea to Penny, oh, first of all to Zena, and then to Penny and Georgia, and they were all for it. And so we just started the conversations, you know, with all of us collectively who are here now, as well as Kent Morris and Adrienne Simmons, who's a wonderful dancer and performance maker who lives here on Kaurna country as well, and whose family are from Broken Hill originally. And so we just started thinking about how we could make this happen. And we've, been thinking, the initial thoughts we had were that we wanted to be able to include country as part of the conversation and as a way for us to be together to respond. And so we didn't want to just use existing work. It was about working together to come up with the ideas, thinking about what we know individually and how we can collectively bring that knowledge together, learn from each other, and provide a platform for us to start thinking and making work from. So it's coming at it from a different perspective, in that we don't know exactly what we're presenting, but we're working really hard on developing what that will be, so that you know, we can present that information in a timely manner. But it is a different way of working.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a bit more,
Yeah.
I guess, towards the end. But the thing that draws us all together is country. And so it made sense for that to be a big part of our rationale for this. Yeah, and I should say as well, I forgot to, I'm sorry, that Kent Morris sends apologies, as does Adrienne Simmons, to other members of our group. They weren't able to be here tonight, unfortunately.
I might just quickly introduce Raymond and
Please.
David as well. And thank them for joining us. So David is a Barkindji man based in Broken Hill. His family is from the Menindee region of the Barka, or Darling River, as some people call it. Following the traditions of his mother, grandmother, and great grandmother, Doyle's an emerging carver and artist. He makes carved emu eggs, mussel shell jewelry, and wooden objects, including bowls and sculptures. Doyle is also a knowledge holder of Barkindji bush medicines and edible plants. He produces medicinal lotions, tinctures, and soaps using these same medicines. So thank you, David, for joining and for the explanation earlier. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen.
And I'd also like to introduce Raymond Zeta, who grew up in Port Augusta and Murray, South Australia. He's Aboriginal and Afghan with Scottish heritage. As an artist, he works primarily with photography, video, and digital design. He's also an award-winning radio broadcaster with 13 years experience in production, presentation, and technical operations. So thank you very much for joining, Raymond. I can start with you, David. Is that okay? And thinking about if you could share a little bit about your work that you do in the Flying Doctors, to schools, to galleries and art spaces, to your plant research, and to your place, your work in various boards and communities. You know, how much is your cultural grounding and your kind of knowledge part of all those varied spaces that you find yourself in?
Yeah, look, I'll try and keep it a bit brief, because there's a lot to cover, but learning and teaching culture has become a big part of what drives me at the moment, and for the last few years. So the act of learning and then cementing it into practice through teaching is the way our people have done it for millennia. And I think it's the greatest way of learning. You know, it's the see, act, do principle, which the schools all use, and we've been doing it, you know, for thousands and thousands, and as most of us say, forever. So it's the way we've been keeping our culture and our practices alive. And that's the way I actually prefer to teach. So I go out into the schools, I teach around bush medicines, bush foods, how we traditionally use them, how we can use them more contemporarily now, as well as I work, like you mentioned before, I work for the Flying Doctors. Currently, I've been there with them for 4 years as an Aboriginal health practitioner, which is a really not a very good description, but I explain to people as a nurse that doesn't give medication. It's actually a lot more than that. It's education. It's being out. We're doing clinical aspect of it. Some of us do emergency, and some of us specialise in different facets. So that's a whole gamut in itself. But with the Flying Doctors, I've been able to use and bring a lot of the cultural practices into my practice, which works really well, especially out in this region. We've got 19 communities that are really quite remote, with some of the communities only having as many as 6 people, some being quite large with about 500 or 600 people. And it's a way of most of that country is also Barkindji country, so it does give me a bit of a foot in. Some of the other country is Malyankapa, which is on my grandfather's side of it, and we're having a bit more to do with the Malyankapa side of it. So that's been a really positive thing to have those regions in the places that I visit. So one of the things that I think, after learning so much from so many elders, and I think Zena might have mentioned before, I'm fortunate enough to continue living on country, and have for forever, basically. So I'm in my early 40s, and so I've been here pretty much all that time. And the elders, of course, pass on through teaching in bits and pieces, and it's for me, it's like an obligation that it's also then my job to be teaching the younger generation, because our elders just cannot possibly teach everybody, and it's the way it was done all the time. We'd learn something, we'd teach someone else, and then we'd cement it into the way that we conduct our practices. So like I say, it's not my knowledge that I use, it's the knowledge that's been passed on to me and shared from our ancestors through a long line of people. So probably one of the other things worth mentioning is I do sit on a few boards, one of them being the Kinchika's Elders Board as a proxy for my mum. And through that, we've had some carbon dating of the half fires around the Lakes region. It's shown that we've actually been in the region for at least 45,000 years continuous. So I think the continuous is the main word there, because we've actually never had to move away from the Menindee Lakes region or the Barker, and we've been able to maintain our lifestyle there due to the water, due to the plant life, due to the animal life that's around it and relies on it. So we rely on the lakes, and I always think that it relies on us as well, because we're the keepers, and we're also the caretakers of that region. So that's pretty important to me, is our environment. Fortunately, with the modern technology we have now, I can share a lot of knowledge pretty quickly, because a lot of our people are dispersed, as this group shows. We've got people living in Melbourne, Sydney, we've got people living in Adelaide. So it's good to be able to share that stuff without actually physically being together. And then when we're together, we go out and we practice it on country. We share it, and again, that's that cementing it into our knowledge part. And then they go home and they teach their families, so that when they come out, they can actually walk through the process. So yeah, we're a pretty diverse bunch, and we've got some amazing talent with us. We've got some fantastic artists. I rely on Kent and Raymond for my technology, because I'm hopeless with it, as tonight proves with the computers. But Zena is one of my go-to people when I'm talking about plants, because of her research background. I think if I could be an amateur researcher, I'd probably fit into that spectrum as well. So I have a big passion for our plants, a big passion for our traditional bush medicine. So I'm continuously researching those. Currently working on a book with a lady from Sydney, Sophia Zacconi, who's a landscape architect, and she is helping me to put a book together that will be aimed at, to start with high school kids, and then hopefully a little bit younger, that will actually go into the schools, and the kids will actually be immersed in posters and books and all this learning, so that when they get older, even though they may not realise at the time, they've actually taken a lot of the information in, which is how I learnt. My grandparents taught me, and it wasn't until I was probably in my late 30s that I thought, I know that. I got taught that when I was quite young, and my wife corrects me sometimes. I use Barkandji words instead of Australian words, thinking that they're common words around the whole continent, or at least Australian slang, but they're not. They're our own words that I've just had, and we've never known any difference. So it's really nice that I've had that privilege of growing up with the family. So yeah, I do work for the RFDS. I've been there for 4 years. I've been an Aboriginal health practitioner for 20 years now. And in the last few years, I've fallen into the art realm. I've decided I wanted to start carving wood, which I really enjoy. Obviously, I wouldn't do it, but then I also use that as a way to tell stories about different things. I use timber that's been through a bushfire. I use the mussel shells when the drought was at its height. Me and my wife and kids picked up thousands and thousands of them, and they were unable to relocate themselves back to the water. So every 10, 15, 20 shells we'd pick up, we'd find a live one, so we'd return it to the water. So it became a bit of a way to show some respect to it, as I started carving images of the river into the shells, and then people would ask about it. So that was my to actually start telling people about the destruction with the drought that we'd gone through, how decommissioning the lakes would, which was a talk at the time, would really impact our environment, but also the environment of the Barker. So the whole Murray-Darling Basin. A lot of people probably don't realise that most yellow belly that come out of the Darling and the Murray have spent time in the Menindee Lakes, because it's a natural nursery. It's actually one of the last natural nurseries left in Australia for that particular species of fish. So they're not born there; they just grow out there because it's a safe environment. But I'll probably get off track on a little bit of a tangent there, because like I said, it is a bit of a passion of mine. And so I've started to do a focus a little bit more on the plants, because when we think Aboriginal food, we think kangaroo, we think emu, we think possum and goanna, but a lot of our food was plant-based. We were sustained on it because it was low caloric to go and pick a bunch of warrigal greens. It didn't take much to pick some mushrooms or some berries. We didn't use much energy, and that's what sustained us. That was what was able to give us the energy to actually go out and hunt the game that took a bit more. And even one of my favourites, our quandong, is shown to hold its flavour and its nutritional value dried for 8 years. And it was used as a protein substitute. So if times were lean for meat, we would be able to rely on the quandongs. Also, within all that, I've written a book of poetry, which is based on culture and our environment. I do lots of education, and I've sort of been dabbling a little bit in a lot of other cultural aspects, but I should let someone else have a chat, and maybe I could jump back in later. So I think I've ticked off all my quick little notes that I've got here, and but happy to talk a bit more later on. I just don't want to take up all the time, otherwise you won't shut me up.
No, well, yeah, we like hearing from you, and yeah, it's amazing all of the varied work that you do, but all that there is something that's connecting it all, and so we might think about that a little bit later. But
yeah, thank you.
Thanks. And so Raymond, I might ask you, how has your culture? How has your culture and belonging influenced the stories that you tell, and the types of work that you wish to make as an artist, but also as a storyteller, broadcasting?
So for me, I guess growing up in Maori and Port Augusta was a great thing, because Maori particularly was a very small community, and so everyone everyone knew who you were, knew what your history was, and I knew what my history was and connection was with that place as well. Then as I moved to Port Augusta and the world expands that bit more, you start to get this, not a sense, but a feeling that you don't belong as much as you thought you did. And then moving to Adelaide, it was that same kind of thing again of moving into a bigger city and having people wanting to, I guess, have you fit into very neat little boxes so that they can kind of define who you are and know who you are. And for me, particularly, I don't feel like I fit into any one neat little box. So you do start to get that sense of, well, maybe I don't belong here. And that's, I think, where a lot of my works in my practice derive from as well, is being able to take that step back and go, hang on, this is what's really happening here. I'm not sure if you can see that, so I'd like to, I guess, create a work and create a space where we can talk about some of those things. And my art practice is really important for me for that. If I was to hand somebody a brochure and say, here, have a read of this pamphlet about racism, automatically people are going to filter out what they're seeing in that document and what they're reading. Whereas creating a work like Racebook, which talks about racism, people see it from across the room. It looks like the Facebook logo, except it says Racebook. And so it's quite humorous to them. They're familiar with it. It draws them in closer. But then as they come in closer and start reading it more and more, the work becomes darker and darker as you see the work is made up completely of racist comments from a couple of Facebook groups. So, but I guess having that ability to have people come into it with an open mind and then start reading it and seeing it that way is a much more effective way for me to be able to, I guess, raise awareness and create a space to talk about those issues. And for me, being quite a shy person as well, it's also a really safe way for me to say, here, have a look at that on the wall, and I don't have to be there to have somebody respond to it immediately. And I was really surprised with that work. Actually, I thought people may have come out of the woodwork and came at me for that, but there's been not one negative comment from anyone in relation to that. So I think that work is on the Google Arts and Culture website, and you can zoom in a bit and maybe be able to read some of the comments. But yeah, hopefully there's another version around somewhere where you can zoom in and read some of that. Just be aware of some of the language that you'll find in there and some of the really disturbing comments that you get in there as well.
Yes, I have a rule not to usually read the comments
Yes.
on newspaper articles and things like that, because you can sometimes feel quite traumatized by how much racism still exists in regards to Indigenous people and art, and so that was an incredible work.
And that's where that piece grew from as well. It was a friend saying, can you go and report this group? And then I clicked through to report it, and then had a look at the comments and thought, I want to do more with this than just report it, because what happens is it gets reported, it gets taken down, and for the people who set up the group, that's a real big pat on the back. Like, we were so offensive that Facebook banned us. So I wanted to. So what I did was I copied and pasted all of those, and it was probably 3 months of it just sitting in a PDF document until I could kind of think of a way that I wanted to present that and get that out there for people to see, and hopefully start a larger conversation around that.
Well, yeah, thank you. We're gonna have a conversation all together, but I might go to Nikki and Zena and talk about your practices. And so Nikki, your work is so beautiful, and it's about documenting country, recording, observing, being on, and that's really been the foundation of your work. And I was just wondering how the way that you spend time on country has evolved over time.
Thanks, Stephen. I think it's been really interesting, just, really, even just in the last 12 months, how differently I'm working. And for me, it's been about taking whatever opportunities I can to leave the city and go back either to the Barker or to the Murray River. Sort of around the Riverland of South Australia is where our family moved to when we came back we lived in Canada when I was growing up as a child for 9 years, and Zena was born in that time. So she's a lot younger than me. But it was a place that for me, I felt a really strong connection coming from as a teenager, moving back to Australia and not really having much of a connection here because we left when I was only 5. And so the backwaters of the Murray was a place where I walked and I learned how to drive. And my new friends in the Riverland, we used to go camping, and it was just this lovely place to be at one, with the beautiful trees and the waterways.
And then there's some of your work, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'll just screen.
So, and then as once I left school, I ended up going to art school, and it was really so transformative for me to go to a place and to learn about fine art photography. So right from the really basics of creating images in black and white film using different cameras. And then there was a workshop when I was in my second year of art school studying photography where Kate Brakey, who's an artist, she was born in Port Lincoln and grew up in Port Lincoln, but now lives in Tucson in Arizona and has lived in the United States for the last 30 years. But she was still living in Adelaide at that time in the sort of late 80s. And she gave a workshop in hand colouring. And I just, took to it because I love colour. I love being able to mix colour, but I'm not someone who knows how to create an image from scratch on a, white blank piece of paper. And photography was my medium. So it was like, wow, this is, being an opportunity for me to be able to use that process of painting, but already, having an image and being able to play with that image and make it what I wanted it to be. So my practice has really, ever since I very first started, was really about creating mainly black and white images, enlarging them, initially enlarging them myself in a dark room. And Zena was my assistant all those years ago when I was doing my honours degree. Z worked alongside me and we made these really large scale mural prints that were over 1 metre wide and 1.5 metres long. And we used these tubs to roll the prints in. It was like you were swimming in chemistry. It was seriously toxic and probably not health and safety wise. There's no safety, but we did that because it was a way for us to be able to make this work without it costing a lot of money. So that was using the silver gelatin papers. And then as time went on, I had less and less time in my life to be able to spend in a dark room, and technology, was evolving. And so now I still work with black and white film and create the images on the black and white film. And then the film is developed and then I get it scanned at really high resolution and print it onto paper is the medium I've been using, beautiful Hanamala cotton rag paper, which is beautiful. It's like a watercolor paper and you can really manipulate the color onto it. But the actual images themselves and creating the images comes from me doing what I've always done, and that is walking those backwaters and spending time listening, looking, hearing and feeling, getting signs. It takes me back to when I could go camping with my cousins and when I've camped with family and friends. But it really is just about getting a sense of where I am, but also looking for signs in the landscape of Aboriginal occupation of these incredibly beautiful places and trying to find that peace within that place and being able to recreate that and to share that with people as a way to talk about issues and concerns about our waterways and the way that you know, we've basically been sold down the river for, you know, for what? It's, you know, become a commodity. Water is a commodity. And so it really helps me to, you know, have a platform to be able to talk about my issues and concerns that I have with the way that our waterways are treated politically, and yeah, to provide a platform for other people to also speak up about country and how we can make change.
Thank you, Nikki. And Zena, I was wondering if I could ask you, you know, you're doing so much right now, and I was just wondering, you know, what is the kind of thread that links all of your disparate kind of work?
Yeah, I guess I've always done lots of different jobs in my life, and quite often at the same time. It's just I'm not very good at sticking to my lane or sticking to one thing, but I've realised that's just sort of how I am, and so I'm just enjoying it, and also not trying to be an expert at anything, because I just think I'm midway through lots of things, and that's okay. I don't need to just concentrate on one. But I guess the thing that links all of my work together is my absolute love of storytelling. It's something that I've always done. A long time ago, I was an actor, a professional actor, and I guess that's, you know, obviously a form of storytelling. But, you know, I've changed careers lots and lots of times, and now, you know, my storytelling is more in the form of writing, but for a long time it was research in the last sort of 10 plus years. So sorry about my daggy slides, but they're just a bit helpful for me to sort of think about what to talk about. But yeah, these are the themes that underpin my work. So I'm always looking for projects that empower Aboriginal people and country. And I'm really passionate about Aboriginal plant use, and I absolutely love geeking out with David Doyle. We geek out big time. I really love illuminating Indigenous knowledge in any way that I can in the work that I'm part of. I'm very interested in intellectual and cultural property rights. I have absolutely zero expertise, but I'm an armchair enthusiast, I don't know what that word is. I also am really interested in food sovereignty. Again, know virtually nothing, but it's something that I really love to read on and think about and yarn with other people about. And if I was going to continue in academia, which I'm not, I've just recently resigned from the University of Melbourne, I would have been going really hard into the intersection between colonisation and climate change, because this is something that's increasingly being recognised as intertwined. And until we can undo the ongoing circumstance of colonisation, climate change is not going to be something that we can adequately meet or deal with. Not just in my opinion, a lot of people around the world are saying this, and some of the big reports that are coming out for the first time worldwide are drawing this line between colonisation and climate change, and their the way that they're absolutely married in the problems that we're having today. And I guess I started, like, the main work that I'm doing at the moment is really, I guess, it's an intersection between arts and science, but in that it's kind of weird for me to say that, because I really hate silos, and I just see them as such a massive problem in academia and the way that we build knowledge. And so whilst I say it's an intersection between arts and science, I guess in some ways it doesn't really make sense from our perspective as Aboriginal people, because everything is so cleverly holistic, and seeing things in those silos is really, I think it really limits in a way that's quite counter to trying to build knowledge. So this is just a picture of a project that kind of got me started in my most recent university role. I was a research fellow at the Clean Air Urban Landscapes Hub, which was a hub built of lots of different scientists and people from across different universities in Australia, who basically were looking at ways of making cities healthier for all living things. And so this was a project I did with lots of other people. It was called the Living Pavilion. It was at the University of Melbourne, and I was the lead researcher on the project, and we got 40,000 native plants, and we put them in one spot at the university. And then I researched all of the plants and presented that research on site, and lots of other people in the project were in charge of different aspects of that, but the plants was kind of my big thing. And that's, you know, that's really what's led on to a lot of the work that I've ended up doing now today. I realised the power of our plants during that project. I'd always been passionate about them, but I realised the power of the narratives held within our plants in that they open a portal, I think, to all ages to understand the complexity of our knowledge, our scientific practice, the way that we have observed country over the longest time imaginable to unlock all of its potential. The fact that we've got plants that, you know, might be completely poisonous and we can send them through 5 really nuanced processes or more, or maybe 2 or sometimes 8, to turn them from extremely poisonous to extremely nutritionally valuable is just such a great way of helping people to understand the complexity of our knowledges. And so I think that's why I really went so hard into trying to learn and share more about Indigenous plant use through that work, because I just realised that there was so much potential for people to have a greater respect and understanding of our knowledges and the need to empower them within, you know, especially the way we manage country, because yeah, today there's such massive problems with the environment, and I see, as well as, you know, I think all of us as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people see that we are really not empowered in the way that we should be with the knowledges that we have and the longevity we have in terms of sustainable and careful management of country over time to really be in the driver's seat. We're still so often seen as consultants and on the side. And I think that's really to do with people not understanding the complexity of our knowledge and the power that it has. So this was a small way for me to start that conversation with all ages, which I find really important. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And also at a site like a university that is very invested in very particular types of knowledge production and how, this generates different ways of valuing, Indigenous forms of knowledge.
Yeah, and through those projects I've been doing at the uni, more and more I found ways to bring many and varied Aboriginal community members into those projects. I guess a big problem, and really one of the main reasons why I've left academia recently, is just the complete lack of cultural safety. I was bringing people in for projects, and no matter what I did, what I set up, how hard I worked to make it a safe space for us to work in together and to share knowledge, I really found that it's just not. And it's taken a huge toll on my health, because obviously when you bring elders and other community members into the university to do a project, you're that bridge. And when things don't go the way that they're supposed to, that's on you, no matter how hard you've worked to try and make everyone safe and make their intellectual property safe. I think we've got a long way to go. And unfortunately, like, I'm not the only Aboriginal person I know that's left academia recently. I think that there's a big reckoning that needs to be had, and we need lots more mob in the university system to make change, but it's not safe for people to be there at the moment. So it's this terrible kind of cycle, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's just quickly just a book that I put together, a booklet. It's free, it's online. It was centered around Kulin Nation plants because that's where my project was. So it was on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, but we looked at the broader Kulin Nation plants because that just made sense, because a lot of the plants are the same right across different parts of Victoria. So yeah, I just made this booklet from that research that I did for that project, the Living Pavilion, and it's free, and it's been used a lot by kinder groups and school groups, but also community groups, families. It's just a very simple introduction into understanding some of our plant use, but also people are making bush gardens all the time now with Indigenous plants. And I thought there was an opportunity being missed where they also could learn about the strength and power of our culture and knowledge. And that's why I put this together.
And, I heard you, I think, say a few times about the importance of accessibility, and this is a free online access. you know, I was wondering if you could talk about the importance of that in your work as well.
Yeah, I guess what I saw a lot in academia, and I'm speaking in really terrible generalizations, so, you know, feel free to ignore half of what I'm saying, but I just see a bit of a waste of resources a lot of the time. And I see people doing like an absolute power of work, but kind of accidentally disappearing up their own quote, because like, who gets to read it? What's the language like? What other people who have this knowledge are they bringing in? And so all the work that I did, I tried to make sure that it had like a valuable outcome for country and for mob as much as is possible. Like, we all try to do these things, but yeah, I tried in sort of trying to visualize what my projects were going to be about and how they were going to play out. They were the two things that were important for me. What does this do for community? What does it do for country? So that accessibility was really, really important, because I could do all of this work and only a select few would see it, because it might be in really academic language. It might be behind a paywall. So I think there were perhaps, you know, people at the uni who thought that I didn't know how to do academia because I didn't bother with the big research papers. I know how to do it, and I'm perfectly capable of doing it. I chose not to. I chose to do things in a different way that, yeah, meant that people could read it, get something from it, and think about their own obligations to country. That's, yeah, making things accessible does that. And I tried to make things accessible every step along the way. So with our Emu Sky exhibition, there was more than 30 Aboriginal community members who came on as part of that project. And people were sharing knowledge, beautiful writing, and of course their artworks and their research. And I just really didn't want that to disappear into the ether after the show comes down. So I see that as a real waste of resources that's happening in the arts. People are getting elders and other community members who are very time poor to do absolutely beautiful work. And then sometimes it's just not accessible after the show's finished. And when I was at uni 10 years ago, I wanted to quote mob all the time in my essays. And it was only like 10 or 12 years ago, but there wasn't as much available then as what there is now. And I really noticed, like, if I wanted to quote an Aboriginal community member from an art show that I'd seen, that I had to go and buy the $60 or $80 book. And I didn't have the money then to do that. And so with the catalogue for Emu Sky, we decided instead to like work really hard to push to get a website made, which was not cheap and it wasn't easy to get over the line. But I've been told that website will stay up for more than 5 years, which I'm really happy about. And then all of that work that people did as part of Emu Sky, it doesn't disappear, and it becomes a valuable resource, not just for people at the University of Melbourne, but anywhere. And you can go onto the website and you can hear David Doyle talking about his beautiful work. You can hear Annie Joy giving her welcome. You can hear Uncle Badger talking about his work, but also you can quote from the essays that are really talking about what's important to us right now in terms of the way country is managed and the way our knowledges are perceived. So I hope that'll be a resource that people will use. And already at the uni, I've actually noticed that a lot of people are quoting from some of those essays. I would have liked a lot more to go up. We were very lucky to get the amount that we did, but I mean, I had another 25 people that I could have got to write who were keen to. But you know, it's resourcing. We didn't have the resources to do that. But yeah, I'm kind of rambling now, but no, every little thing I try and make sure it's got another life. It doesn't just get put in the skip. Even knowledge doesn't get put in the skip.
Absolutely. And, you know, like David said, it's not our knowledge to hoard, it's ours to kind of pass it on and share with others in, you know, culturally appropriate ways. And, you know, I really love the idea that you're trying to, you know, transform, you know, the archive into something that's embodied, that people carry with them this knowledge in them. And so maybe we don't need it to rely on books as much as we have in the past as well. So, yeah. Well, I wanted to, oh wait, I've got some more.
I don't want to talk too much longer because I'm taking too much time, but I guess part of my storytelling also is through my research work. I've been really privileged to be able to write some papers for policy makers and other things that I guess I've been able to speak from my perspective about problems that I'm seeing on country, and I've also, more than that, been able to give voice to lots of Aboriginal community members to talk about problems that are happening on country. And one of the big things that I've done in the last couple of years was I was one of the Indigenous co-authors on the State of the Environment Report 2021, which is a report that basically goes out, it's mandated, legislated, it's got to go out every 5 years, and it gives all of us an opportunity to have an overview of the environment in Australia right now and in the last 5 years. And I guess to hold people accountable for what's happening, but to be able to mark decline as well is a really big part of the report. But the 2021 report is actually the first time that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander authors have been involved in that. And I worked with, I think, 10 other Indigenous authors, and we were led by Dr. Terry Janke. And we worked with non-Indigenous authors as well as co-authors on chapters for that report. And I was able to write a lot about what's happened on our barker, and I expected some of it would be deleted out just because we were writing so much, researching so much, adding so many direct quotes from community members, from royal commissions, all sorts of things that people have spoken at, but also the consulting work that happened as part of this report went out to communities right across Australia and asked them to talk about problems on their country in terms of the environment and their perception of what was happening, solutions. And so, yeah, I and the other authors were able to add that first person voice right throughout the report, and none of it got deleted. I was really surprised. So if you want to look at the State of the Environment Report, it's very big, but it's broken up into chapters, and people obviously have different interests. So you can go to the chapter that perhaps most interests you. But a good place to start, I think, is the Indigenous chapter, which is also a new thing. It's the first one, and it beautifully showcases the way that mobs all over this place we now call Australia are leading extremely successful actions on country that make sense to them culturally and in terms of their custodianship and their custodial responsibilities, and they're actually having the best biodiversity outcomes. And so, yeah, I love the Indigenous chapter because we got to tell those stories of the work that's being done, because we need to empower people more to be in the driver's seat, because having to rely on government funding that's in a cycle of every 3 years is ridiculous, and people can't do the work that they're capable of when we're just sort of seen as consultants. And that's just a little bit about Emu Sky, which finished last Sunday, and was, yeah, it was a wonderful project, and everyone who was involved was really happy, and I couldn't be happier because, you know, yeah, at times it was a huge burden making sure everything got delivered the right way within an institutional context. And yeah, it was a wonderful project to work on, and I encourage people to go to the website and have a look at the absolutely beautiful works that Aboriginal community shared as part of that.
Thank you, Zena. And this is the book that is going to be launched next month?
Yeah, I think it's the end of September it comes out. Yeah, so I wrote it with Associate Professor Michael Sean Fletcher, who's a Wiradjuri academic, and Professor Leslie Head, who's been doing incredible work for more than 30 years and was someone that I really admired at the university. And yeah, it was a real honour to write with both of those authors and to get to, I guess, present a lot of the research that I've been doing the last few years in a way that I hope is accessible. We sort of wrote it, it's meant to be written for a general audience. When I was writing it, I was thinking about people at high school because I don't think we're learning enough in schools. So I tried to make really complex ideas accessible. I don't know if I succeeded or not, but yeah, I hope some people will find it a good resource to think about the way our plant knowledge has been perceived over time and ways that we can empower it into the future. Oh, and this is just a photo of me and Nick, because Nick's obviously been a huge influence in my work, because I've seen the work that she's done forever with her Tarnandy Festival and, you know, over 10 plus years. And I love the way Nick has always been able to make that festival about empowering mobs everywhere, and not just individual artists, but whole communities. And I've based my ethos on the work that she does in that way. It's not about you, It's about building a platform to amplify others and to help them, you know, achieve what they're capable of in terms of their art practice. So, yeah.
People wanted to share, you know, what they felt were the most positive and exciting aspects of the time that you spent all together. So I'll just get the slide up.
Yeah, and I might just start by saying, and I'll shut up after this, but really the main part of this project for us was, like Nick said, we still in lots of ways don't know exactly the story that we're telling. We've got some really beautiful threads beginning to emerge, but what we really wanted was just to be together on country and to see what happens, because country is the repository of all knowledge. And so it makes sense to make country a part of the whole process of actually working out what you're going to tell. Because every time we go out on country together, and we have in the past, these beautiful narratives emerge that we didn't know were going to emerge. And I've been really lucky with quite a few of the projects I've done the last couple of years, including Emu Sky, to have time out on country, recording and doing other things. And yeah, so that was kind of the basis of why we've done these 2 trips. We did one in April and one last month, I think. Yeah, so we've had this time together and with Uncle Badger and other community members, and yeah, I'll let others speak, but it has been a really special time, and I'd love to hear the perspectives of the rest of our group who are here in terms of what they've already gained in that time together.
Raymond or David, did you want to add
Yeah.
this project?
All in the things that are coming up at the moment, they're bringing back some lovely memories. For me, because I live up on country I'm in Broken Hill at the moment. I come from Menindee, and I think one of the things for me is I get renewed energy from what people are coming out and seeing. You know, I'm immersed in it daily, and I don't take it for granted one little bit. But you know, just a sunset, the way that some people look at it, the colours and the way they can show how special it is. You know, it just makes me appreciate our country so much more. And I think one of the things that we've all talked about is the feeling of being home and the comfort and the country that we're on. So we did spend a week at Menindee together, which is, like I mentioned, was my hometown. So, you know, I was really, really comfortable to be there to kind of, I guess, be an official tour guide and show people of what I really special about the place. And trust me, a week's not long enough, a year's not long enough. I don't think time's long enough, to be honest. It's a great world as far as I'm concerned. But also then we spent a week at Mutawinji together. Mutawinji, grandfather's family are traditional custodians of there, but when I was young, we lost our grandfather. We kind of not lost the link to it, but we didn't spend as much Winji as we really should have. And going back with the guys renewed the way I looked at the way I respected and thought of how people utilised the hardships people went through, and the reason why I celebrated there is really the biggest things that I got out of it was that people came there for a reason. We came together, and it was a really lovely place for us to come from different locations, and we actually came together again at Mutawinji, and we pretty much did what our old people did in a different format. We came together, we shared meals, we shared knowledge, we shared our cultural aspects of it. Our friendship ties got stronger. You know, everything that our elders have been teaching throughout the years all culminated at that kind of time and in that place. And we were able to come away and know that we were going to have great ideas, that the things that we were together or the ideas we had we're all going to be representative of where we were and what, at that time and place, as well as our past and hopefully our future. So, you know, those things are really important. All ways that we definitely share and teach others that came on. But we had other people come and listen to us, conversations that weren't invited, but you know, they were comfortable enough. We were comfortable enough to be able to share as well. But I might let Raymond talk a little bit now. Just put you right on that spot, mate.
Yeah, thanks. I was just enjoying sitting back listening. I mean, yeah, both trips onto country have been really amazing. Just getting to spend time, you know, with everybody, and for me, it was really surprising to, because the last time I was in Broken Hill, I was really young. I was maybe 10 years old or younger. I don't know how well the camera will pick that up, but that's me at Broken Hill Racecourse, lost at the races, and locked in a horse yard until my parents could find me. But that made it into the paper in Broken Hill, and that was my last time in Broken Hill before these trips. So I was expected to be triggered, but actually it was really surprising to realize that I have a much stronger connection with Broken Hill than I do having lived in Adelaide for 30 years. So it's, yeah, the trips up there have been really special, and I'm looking forward to going back more, hopefully as a part of this project and just in future in general as well. And traveling around with David Doyle, driving from Broken Hill to Menindee, the number of times we stopped to wander out and look at plants and see all the native foods that we could have, and getting to try all of those was pretty amazing. And that happened on the trip out to Kinchiga as well as out to Murruwinchi as well. So it really does give you an appreciation for the country, and it'd be nice to get out there for longer and have time for, you know, our sense of taste to adjust, to get away from all of the sugary diet that I have, and to really appreciate the plants and the resources that are out there for us to enjoy.
This looks like one of the times the car stopped and looking at things.
One of the many times I kept making notes of what all the things were called, but I don't trust my knowledge enough after just 2 trips to go out there and just eat any old plant I see out there. But I definitely know there's some stuff out there to enjoy.
Yeah, that's the Darling River lily. That's a really gorgeous that grows in our region, and we were quite fortunate to still see really late in the season. So really.
I think, is Dave frozen? Oh,
I don't know. I'm not sure what happened there. I dropped out for a second, but
yeah.
So I was just saying, another picture was the Darling River lily, and it was, even though it was late in the season, we still were fortunate enough to, because a couple of people hadn't seen that flowering, and it's a spectacular flower. And there's me geeking again. Sorry.
Yeah. And yeah, David was actually showing us all the different ways that it can reproduce itself. And you know, to live in a pretty arid environment, it's incredible, that plant. You know, to be able to grow in sand like that pretty much, and have all these different ways of making itself viable. It's just really wonderful to, yeah, have someone like David with us who can explain things to us. And, you know, I'd read about this in books, but I'd never, you know, seen it on country. And it just is so rich to be out on country and to have, you know, and each of us have our own knowledges as well. And that's the way culture has always worked. You're not expected to know everything. You just know your bit, you know it the right way, and you make sure you pass it on the right way. And that's why it's lovely being together with a group. We become so rich through being together and what we each can share.
And I think the other thing that's really come through and in these journeys together is the goodwill that we each show to each other, and the support that we give to enable us to be able to be together and to spend time together. It's so precious. And, you know, every day is full. You kind of plan things out in your mind as to how it might work, and you run out of time. You know, all of a sudden it's time to go home. And but the journeys that we've been on together, walking when we're at Murrumbidgee, you know, every day was a big day of walking through different gorges. And these guys are all a lot more agile than I am, and they would be clambering up rocks, and they'd be calling out to me from very, very high above, and I'd just be in the creek bed having a beautiful time, you know, feeling the wind and, you know, photographing different aspects of that incredible place. But just to learn and to be able to understand the plants in more depth through the knowledges that Z and David are sharing with us has been, you know, really enriching. And you know, I treasure these times that we've had and that we will have together, being able to learn more and to think about, you know, how we can present this knowledge in our own individual ways, but also collectively as part of this exhibition. And just, I feel incredibly privileged to be able to do this together. And, you know, our lives have been traveling to and from family in Menindee, but you know, you become busy with family obligation. You don't really have a chance to do this kind of exploration and to learn and understand. It's a different way of learning.
Well, the other problem is we realised we were always going home for funerals and really quick trips, and that's not the way it should be. You know, we have to have time together to build our relationships, to spend time on country, to revitalise ourselves as well. And so, yeah, it's really hard to make these times, especially with all of us mobbed with kids and things, but you just make it happen because it's so important. And so much of our cultural output, I find, is expected to be performative. Like, it has to be showing everyone else, but actually, where's the time where we do things for ourselves and each other? And right at the start, Nick and I said, you know, the work's going to be beautiful, we have no doubt, but it's actually the least important thing of this. The most important thing is that we are together, that we are learning from country and with country, and that we are rejuvenating ourselves, you know, building our cultural strength and foundation and knowledge. Yeah.
Well, I think that energy and energizing kind of work that you're doing is working for country, and country is very lucky to have you advocating for it. I don't know if people wanted to share anything else about this collaborative project, which you're telling us the process is just as important as, you know, what might be the product in the end. Did anyone want to add? No? Okay. Raymond?
That was a truck activating my microphone.
Well, I wanted to ask, you know, how is the Barker right now? What is the current status?
Look, anyone that wants to come up and see the Barker, it's the time to come. It is overflowing the banks. The lakes are overfull. The flowers are out in bloom. The bird life is spectacular. You know, it's really the Garden of Eden. You know, you come out and everything's at its healthiest. Whereas 2 years ago at this time, working in health, we had lots of endemic grief in the communities. Menindee in particular, we had a mass fish kill, which happened right at the township. So you drive into town and the first thing you got was this awful waft of decaying fish in the water. So to go from that to what it is now is, you know, the total opposite end of the spectrum. It's you couldn't imagine something like that could happen when there is so much water around. But it all comes down to the way we manage our waterways, the sustainability of what we grow in the country. the way we look after the country. So, it is time, still time to make a change about how we do things, how we practice these things in the country, not just in our region, but the whole country, and look at ways of looking after it. And I think that's one of the things that I'm getting out of this project is better ways to look after what we have. So, showing ways that we've traditionally done things, the ways we can still do them today without actually detracting from the environment or taking stuff away that can't be replaced. So, that's one of the things that I'm looking at. Just the other day, as part of this exhibition, I taught some people how to remove a canoe off of a tree, which is a process that's not done a great deal anymore, because it can be a big process. But I had half a dozen people there and they learned it. They took a lot away from it. It was a sort of a on the side thing, because I knew I was going to do this for the exhibition. And again, it was just fortunate enough there were people around that wanted to be part of it. So instead of just watching, as is traditional to our way, they all participated in it. They all had a go at how we do them, how we remove the tree, how we cure the tree, how we look after it pre and post. So it is all about the sustainability, looking after the countryside, because we're not the traditional owners, we're the custodians. I looked at it. We actually want to leave the country better than what it was left to us. So I think that's our responsibility.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you for everyone speaking tonight. We do have a few questions in the chat, and I was wondering if people were happy to stick around and answer some questions. So we have a question we have a question from Reese, who wants to know how institutions can do a better job in bringing Indigenous Australian DNA into everything they do. And I guess a number of you have pointed to your work in universities and in schools and art galleries. And I know that you've all contributed to the kind of uplift of presenting Indigenous art and culture in different ways. But what more can institutions do to bring this Indigenous perspective into these institutions?
I'm going to jump in quickly before Zena does. I think one of the things we need to look at is how we can integrate what our elders are telling us, that the stuff that's not documented or written in a research paper, it's evidence that's been built up over hundreds and thousands of years. It is factual, and how that can be integrated into the way people do their research, their academia, and utilising that as a way of reference. So once we realise that, we still did record history, we did it, and we can insert that into anything that we do, then we will be able to have a huge base of knowledge that we draw upon. Now, I'm going to let Zena talk about the academia side of it, because I don't want to get on that either.
I think for any institution, there needs to be that acknowledgement that it's not an instant thing, that it's a process that takes time, and that the institutions absolutely have to be completely genuine about undertaking. They have to be willing to learn from their mistakes and acknowledge that mistakes will be made along the way. And as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we're very happy to speak up and let people know when things are being done wrong, and not as a way of kind of burning any relationships, but as a way for teaching people so that things can get better and that we do it properly. But it's about acknowledging that it's a process. It takes a lot more than simply setting up a reconciliation action plan, that it needs genuine effort from people. And I guess they need to know that for a lot of institutions, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have kind of been done wrong by as well. So there will be that kind of cautious approach generally from us when we do get approaches from institutions, because we do want to know that it's going to be this genuine thing and it's going to be different.
And as you mentioned earlier, Zena, about how important it is to not just look at the product, but resource the process as well, and make sure that that process is culturally safe as well. And I think that's important.
Yeah,
Did you want to add something?
I think what David and Raymond said is absolutely spot on. I have nothing to add. But I can give an hour-and-a-half lecture about what institutions can do better, because no one wanted to see me on the way out when I slammed the door. But if anyone does want to talk about it, that is an hour-and-a-half lecture, and I would be happy to give it.
7:30 slot, so thank you. But yes, I do have a comment that I wanted to read out from Tia Wyman, a Barkandji woman who says, "It's been an honour to listen to such steadily fellow Barkandji people doing amazing things. Thank you for sharing your knowledges and experiences with us."
Oh.
Really hear that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I just said thank you, sis.
And
Thank you.
And there's one more question from Maria, who's studying to become a lawyer, and she's wants to have some guidance for a non-Indigenous person who wants to work with Indigenous clients in areas of care and protection. Like, I
think,
guess,
yeah, I think the best thing that anyone can do is work really hard to educate themselves, because when you come into a project that might involve community, it's really important to understand as much as possible about some of the pressures and problems that people are facing, and you can actually learn a lot about, even though we're so diverse across all of our language groups right across Australia, our diversity is incredible. I think you can learn so much. Yeah, I think the main way that I ask people to learn is today you can access so much knowledge and first voice from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, in work that they're doing, in writing that they're doing. This has been, an amazing time in the last, especially few years, the amount that you can access to hear from people themselves. Because as you yourself said at the start, Stephen, so much about us as people and our culture has been mediated through non-Aboriginal people for too long. It's something that is going to take a really long time to unravel, because it's created some really terrible stereotypes, and that's resulted in us being treated in a way that is unacceptable in lots of different fora. But I think for someone who is keen to work with community and make a difference, the best thing you can do is work really hard at educating yourself before you even start, because so often I think, we love sharing with people. As a generalisation, I think that we as Aboriginal people are incredibly generous, and I think sometimes too forgiving, but we want things to be better and we just keep brushing ourselves off. And like Raymond said, we'll always tell you when something's not quite right. But I think sometimes there's an expectation, or people are a bit afraid to go into this zone that's a bit sort of unknown, and they really want Aboriginal people to hold their hands through it. But it creates this huge burden. Like, we can't always be the ones that bring people to a place where they can work safely with us. I think a lot of work has to be done by people who aren't Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to educate themselves, because the resources are all there. You just have to look for them. And when you know a lot about us from reading from us, our words, and also hearing us speak our words, it's a really powerful way of coming to a place of knowing what you can do yourself in a safe way where you're not going to harm community.
No,
Yeah, sorry, Stephen, if I just had one bit to add, and it's probably just learn to listen. And it's not just listening with your ears, it's listening with your eyes. You can, if you're not making that, try a different tact, come from a different way. An aspect, people, profession, we see it all the time. Hospitals and don't have a great history with Aboriginal people, and we always continue. But that's probably the main thing that I always recommend to people, is just learn to listen. And it takes a long time to learn to listen to people correctly and to make a connection. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Tread softly and listen carefully, and keep in mind that when people are accessing legal services or medical services or any of those other services, they're there for help. And the last thing that you need to find yourself in is as a position of educator. And so, yeah, it is nice to be able to arrive at a service and receive a culturally safe and appropriate service and not have to expend any of our energy teaching others in the process.
What were you going to say, Nick?
No.
Yes. We often find that Raymond doesn't say much, but his words are weighted with gold. And so we just wait for him to talk and then we go, yep, that's done.
No, absolutely. And, you know, I think all of your words have been, the chat is going, saying how grateful they are to have listened to you all tonight. So, you know, I want to pass on their congratulations and thanks. But also I want to extend my thanks to you all for coming together and talking about this incredibly profound work that you're all doing, that's energizing yourself, but also energizing country in the most important and urgent ways. And so thank you for, and I hope, you know, however this project continues, but I know that it's a project that doesn't get completed, that it's kind of incompletable. It's, you know, your commitment and mission in your lives. So thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for this opportunity. It's wonderful to share with you and each other.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We have one more session in the Ways of Being series, which will be Visual Ways of Being on the 6th of October. So please register and join us for that when you can. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Stephen.